I just want to take 10 seconds just to drink the sight of you in. You are beautiful. For a moment when I was seated, I held my heart and I was doing my best not to be overcome. And I was remembering my own ancestors and remembering the significance even of my being here among you. And I could hear them saying to me, "This is freedom. This is freedom." So I do want to bring you greetings from Auburn Theological Seminary. I am a Baptist. I'm not a Presbyterian. I'm the first Black woman Baptist president of this Presbyterian-rooted seminary. But that's okay because I grew up in the Episcopal Church. I've worked with United Methodists. I've been all over the place with all who would imagine a world of freedom with me. And I bring you greetings from my own congregation in Brooklyn, New York. We are 175 years old. We consider ourselves to be a freedom faith church. And all of our ministry focused on freedom, which is what I want to talk with you all about today. To remember our freedom, to proclaim our freedom, to work for freedom, to invite others into freedom. And we do that best when we remember our songs. This weekend across the country, we will be hearing speeches and sermons and commercials about Martin Luther King. And most of those proclamations will be about his dream. It was not a dream that was just his, but most of what we will hear this weekend will be about his dream. We will not spend a whole lot of time talking about his nightmare, talking about what drove him those last 2 years of his life. I don't recognize the person whose legacy this country celebrates. He has become sanitized, washed clean of all prophetic power. He is the one whose name is raised when power wants us to be quiet, to not raise our concerns at an inconvenient moment, to forget that there are those among us who are suffering, and when we call out our own sufferings, what we hear is, "Remember Martin Luther King?" But he was a Baptist pastor, not just a Baptist preacher. He cared for the souls of a community, which meant that he was connected to people, blessing their babies, conducting their funerals, officiating over their funerals, visiting them when they were in the hospital, preparing Sunday school, managing those confounded budgets. He was a human being. With great love and foresight to understand how much sweeter that love would be for all of us if it was celebrated in freedom. I want to just whisper a word among you that I have been whispering for some time now. It's a scary word to some people. It's called abolition. The idea that we could spend our lives right now working and praying and singing and loving and being so that those who come after us can live their lives singing and praying and loving and being and working for those who come after them, and to do it in freedom. And the greatest threat to this we see among us today. Christian nationalism is not something that's new. It was a part of the founding force, the founding ideologies, the creation of this country. And we say that that history tells us that the founding fathers believed deeply in the separation of church and state. However, what we've done throughout our history is to rule by church, to rule by faith. There's a thing called the doctrine of discovery, which gave those who traveled throughout the world by permission of the Pope in the 1400s, permission to seize and conquer and take and vanquish and enslave forever anyone, any land, any people who were not European Christians. That leaves a whole world of the rest of us. And when they landed on these shores, that is the spirit in which they met the indigenous peoples who were already here. And to build the world that they wanted to build here on these shores, they went to Africa to bring laborers, to enslave people, feeling that they had a right, and hearing proclaimed to them a gospel that provided cover for the dehumanization of an entire people. That shaped a world, And it is the world that we live in right now. There are pockets in this country where people feel relatively safe. They don't ever see anyone who doesn't look like them, who's never had experiences that are not similar to theirs. They don't have to worry about encountering difference. And then there are those brave and hardy souls like us who live in places that are incredibly rich and diverse with all kinds of people, all kinds of experiences. And what we cannot afford, whether we live as we do here in New York City or whether we live in places in this country where we only see people like ourselves, is we cannot afford to imagine a future that is a continuation of what we are experiencing right now. A fragile democracy that holds the right to exclude whoever it wants, whoever power wants to exclude, whether it is their race or their nationality or their religion or their orientation. What we are experiencing now is a country, a democracy that has enshrined a particular religious viewpoint in our Supreme Court. Those are lifetime appointments. And across this country, in state offices, offices, legislation is being considered that will further enshrine and deepen the aims, the tenets, the power, the tentacles of Christian nationalism. It is the opposite of freedom. It is the opposite of this dream of this place where people could worship in freedom, where all kinds of people could come and find their role, their place among them. And I call everything, I determine everything that we do today that rebukes the enshrinement of the power of Christian nationalism as abolition. That means that we work to eradicate poverty. That means that we work to end mass incarceration. That means that we work to ensure that everyone has a healthy home in which to live. That means that we work to ensure that our communities are safe. That means that we work to be mindful of what our bodies need to be safe and healthy and joyful in community. And when I say we work for all. It is that holding the vision of all and not just some. It is the understanding that the spirit of freedom is about abundance, that you don't get to parcel it out according to privilege. And that what makes it so beautiful is that when we experience it, we do everything we possibly can to ensure that the next generation has the same opportunity to experience it. I went to Fisk University in Nashville, Tennessee. I applied to 10 colleges. I got into 10 colleges. I only told my mother about one, Fisk University, because it's where I wanted to go. Well, I did tell her that I got into a conservatory in Yankton, South Dakota. And she asked, do planes go to Yankton, South Dakota? I said, no, but they go to Nashville, Tennessee. And so I went to Nashville, Tennessee, but I was drawn to Nashville, Tennessee because of songs. The songs of the Negro spirituals that Fisk University in Nashville, Tennessee, and its work to give to the world these spirituals. When Israel was in Egypt land, let my people go. I wonder if you have ever heard of what's called the Slave Bible. Has anybody heard of the Slave Bible? It's a compilation of books from the Bible, from Hebrew scriptures, and from Christian scriptures. And what is most interesting about it is not what's in it, but what's not included in it. It was published in 1807 and 1808, and it was intended to be used to evangelize Negro enslaved people in the West Indies. And that Bible does not include the significant part of Exodus. The idea is to contain the imagination of enslaved peoples. What is shared is the story of Joseph's enslavement. What is not shared is the story of freedom. The idea that there would be people who would say, no, this is not the world, this is not the experience, this is not the life that God intended for us. We will be free. And I first encountered that Bible at Fisk University. And I got to it by going through the legacy of the people who were that Martin Luther King heavily invested in. John Lewis, Diane Nash, who understood what it meant to hold a faith that didn't include the promise of freedom. And their working in the civil rights movement, their working was about expanding this notion, proclaiming this notion of freedom. Let my people go. The last thing I want to share with you it's 1967, I think it was, when Martin Luther King met with some of his lieutenants and folks, those who remained with him after the speech at Riverside about Vietnam when everybody left. But he's here, 1967, with Marion Wright Edelman. They're talking about poverty. And he's listening to their arguments. How can people be free if they're mired in poverty? And they were arguing with each other. And some in the group, and I won't call their names, won't call their names, but they said, this is too big. This is too hard. This is not popular. We're already not popular right now. We can't deal with that, and you really got to stop talking about Vietnam. And he said, I would think that we in the SCLC would be the custodians of hope. That we would not think that there was anything that was too big, too hard, too unpopular. That we would remember that what we're doing right now, we're doing for those who come after us. So when I sing the songs of my people, run, Mary, run, run, Mary, run, run, Mary, run, I know the other world is not like this. I'm not talking about some place in heaven beyond. I'm talking about the world that we can build right here. Where all of us are valued and worthy, where all of us have our needs met, where all of us are free. The most important learning I had about Martin Luther King is not about the relationship, the wonderful relationships that he held, even with the grand teachers of this congregation, the relationship that he had with the pastor who ordained me. Beyond all of that, my most important learning about him was that he sang the songs of freedom, even when where there was not a crowd around. He sang these songs of freedom. I don't know where we would be if we had a Bible, and I'm speaking me and my people. I don't know where we would be if we had a Bible that did not include Exodus. And sitting here listening to you today, absolutely, absolutely a sacred experience for me. And this idea that there is a God who desires for all of us to be free. Means that there's work for my hands to do and work for your hands to do. There are places my feet should go, and there are places your feet have to go. There are relationships I have to build, and there are relationships you have to build, because our work is not over. He said, hope for what you imagine, freedom, in spite of what you see. Hope for what you imagine, in spite of what you see. Work for equality, for justice, and for rights for all people, in spite of what you see, because we have to have that in spite of kind of faith. And we're not free. We're not free. As long as there are those who are among us, not just chained, not just incarcerated, but who are subject to live diminished lives as the world goes on. We are not free. And his greatest message was that my freedom is bound up in yours and yours is bound up in mine. And we, not just me, but we can't live into what God imagines for us if we have not worked for the other's freedom. And so, yes, I am declaring a season of abolition for us all as a sacred vocation for us all, as the intractable will of God for us all, for our ancestors, for those who will come after us, for us all. I'm so grateful to have experienced worship with you today, and I'm absolutely grateful to be invited to spend the time with you. And I hope that we will find ways to work together to ensure that God's hope for us is grounded in our willingness to work. Thank you.